Members, we return to orders of the day. Order of the day 1, address in reply. Members, this is the Honourable Member's inaugural speech, and as such, the usual conventions and courtesies of the chamber apply. The Honourable Jess Beckerling.
Thank you, President, and good afternoon, members and guests. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate you, President, on your re-election and extend this congratulations to the Deputy President. We are on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. This incredibly beautiful ancient place has been loved, cared for, interpreted and belonged to for tens of thousands of years. I pay my deep respects to Whadjuk Noongar elders past and present, and to elders across the many nations of what we now call Western Australia. And I extend that respect to First Nations people in this House today. I acknowledge your ongoing connection and responsibility to these lands, waters, skies and spirit. I also acknowledge the countries across this continent were violently invaded just 200 years ago, within living memory. This is a fact that many Australians prefer to ignore or to minimise, and I believe that in this avoidance, we as a whole community have failed to grapple with our shared history, and we have failed to acknowledge the work that we need to do to make amends. The truth is that there were massacres. Tens of thousands of children were kidnapped, languages were outlawed, countries were stolen, and First Nations people worked in slave-like conditions on their own land without the right to vote. We're not asked to feel guilt, but rather to look this truth in the eye, understand it for what it is, and commit to reparations. I speak about this not to shock or shame anyone, but to remind us of our shared history, and to be clear that I believe honest reckoning and the work we do, not just the words we say, are what really matters. The ongoing displacement of First Nations people and destruction of First Nations heritage, including the most recent decision to allow the ancient Murujuga rock art to fade into memory under the cloud of Woodside's industrial pollutants on the Burrup, shows that we are still failing to understand, respect and value First Nations people and the ancient histories and cultures of this land. We need truth, treaty and justice to be a genuine priority that comes with real-world commitments. We also need to honour the resilience of First Nations people, the cultural knowledge that exists across this state, and the people and communities carrying out profoundly important work that continues these connections and cultures. I particularly want to thank Uncle Wayne Webb, Tony Webb and Uncle Eugene Eads for your generosity and the work that you do that educates and empowers so many others, and for all the support and encouragement you've given me over the years. I stood for election with some apprehension. Having grown up in South Africa, where I was aware from an early age of the profound injustices baked into the legal system, and then joining the environment movement here as a teenager, I've long been dismayed and outraged by the Parliament's exacerbation of injustices and a strong believer in community power and capacity. I've questioned where to position myself to maximise my ability to make change, and having agonised as governments have become less attuned to communities and more to corporations, I came to the conclusion that now more than ever, we need deeply committed voices for nature, climate and social justice in the Parliament, using the tools afforded to us in this place to make change, and that I was ready enough, albeit with some uncertainties, to step into the role. This is, of course, a conclusion that many before me have reached, and I'm grateful to be standing on their shoulders. I want to acknowledge the founders of the Greens here in WA and the many Greens members who have worked in this House and in parliaments across the continent to advance our goals of social justice and environmental protection. Jo Valentine was our first ever elected senator in 1990, and she set the tone and the bar for the rest of us and continues to do that as powerfully as ever today. To Christine Milne and Bob Brown, thank you both for your generosity, mentorship and encouragement, and for your extraordinary leadership in our movement. The first time I met Scott Ludlam was in a non-violent direct action role play. I was playing the role of a police officer, and Scott was playing an activist who was trying to lock on under a truck while I pulled, perhaps a little too enthusiastically, at his legs. Scott has inspired and motivated me ever since, and I've deeply appreciated his counsel and encouragement, his unflinching solidarity with the movement, and his exceptional capacity for cutting through the noise to express the mood of the moment and galvanise people for action. And Giz Watson, my dear friend, colleague, mentor and supporter. Thank you for everything you did in this place for 16 years, for your unfaltering dedication to our movement and the people in it, and all the support you've given me over the last 15 years. I also want to thank all the Greens staff, office bearers, candidates, volunteers, and everyone behind them who makes this work possible. We ran a phenomenal campaign together, and the energy and commitment that was shown across the state was second to none. The four of us are in here thanks to you, and we will represent you in this place with that same energy and commitment, honouring your work and continuing to work with you to take our movement forward. Thank you also to everyone who voted for us. We don't take your faith in us for granted, and we will return it every day with dedication to environmental protection and social justice. And to my fellow Greens MLCs, I'm delighted to be here with you and look forward to what we can achieve together. There are too many Greens movement builders to thank by name, but we are extremely well placed in this party thanks to their work and talent, as well as our culture of lifting each other up. And I'm grateful for all the work that has gone into forming our history and culture, and hope to do you all proud in this term of government. We need all the strong foundations that we have, because we're living in very uncertain and challenging times. Within the last 18 months, we've seen the major bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef and Ningaloo, and the browning off of the forests across the southwest. These events are like a blood-curdling scream to climate and biodiversity scientists and to people paying attention to the march of the changing climate. But they have been studiously ignored by those in positions of power to address the root cause, the burning of fossil fuels. We all know that we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees to avoid catastrophic impacts of climate change. At 1.5 degrees, we will lose 90% of the world's coral reefs and the life support that they provide for biodiversity, health and richness of the oceans. And at 2 degrees, we will lose them all. The world's forests will be decimated by fire and drought, and the world we love will have been depleted beyond our imagining. Every fraction of a degree matters as we work to avert this future. Every effort made to reduce emissions, to store carbon in biodiverse, resilient ecosystems, and to turn the tide faster matters. As a wise Buddhist teacher I follow said, the smallest fraction of temperature rise may mean that one more species of frog survives. And I love frogs. It's a tragedy that climate change has been so politicised. We saw with the COVID pandemic that when we fully appreciate a threat posed to all of us, we're capable of quick and decisive action, of putting the community interest ahead of our own and making sacrifices to keep ourselves and each other safe. This is how we should be responding to the threat climate change poses, and I'm committed to working collaboratively with every member in this chamber on this central issue that should unite rather than divide us. Hand in hand with the climate crisis is the biodiversity crisis. When First Nations people here first saw the ships arriving 200 years ago, the rivers, oceans, forests and arid lands were teeming with life. It was an abundant and extraordinary place where 85% of the plant, animal and fungi species were unique to this long isolated continent and could be found nowhere else on Earth. But the effects of land clearing, industrialisation and now climate change have been astonishingly quick and devastating. Australia has the second highest rate of biodiversity loss on Earth. Over the past 200 years, we've lost more mammal species than any other continent, and the decline is continuing at pace. Over 100 species are known to have become extinct in Australia over the past 2 centuries, and the true number is likely much higher. Western Australians love nature, and we've turned out to defend it in large numbers with great determination many times, but our laws are not equipped to value nature over industry, and the dramatic decline of the natural world continues, with critical habitats still being bulldozed and burned, even as we meet here today. There will no doubt come a time when that blood-curdling scream that many of us hear when the reefs bleach and the forests turn brown wakes every one of us up, and we realise what we have done. When the histories are written, it would have been our generation's collective task to bring that day forward, to prevent the worst of what is possible on the trajectory that we're currently on. And this is a driving purpose underlying the work I will do while I'm in this place. My boots and all involvement in Australian politics began when I was 18, and I joined the old-growth forest blockades. I lived under tarpaulins in forests across the southwest with some of the finest people in this country for 3 years, defending exquisite old-growth Karri, Tingle and Jarrah forests with whatever equipment we could find and employ. Those years in the bush taught me the power of camaraderie, to always trust my intuition, that leadership comes in many forms. that you can get a surprisingly good sleep lying down on your jacket by a fire on a gravel road, and you can fit an awful lot of people on a bicycle. It was an extraordinary time, and there's one story that I want to reflect on today. In August 1999, 40 masked men arrived at Wattle Forest with baseball bats and axes to attack a group of mostly young women in a long-established and highly effective camp on the highway between Walpole and Manjimup. The attack was provoked by the then Federal Forestry Minister Wilson Ironbar-Tuckey, who had told an angry timber worker rally in the preceding days that if they wanted those greenies out of their trees, they were clearly going to have to do it themselves. Dear friends of mine, particularly Lauren, Emma, Louise and Angel, held themselves with extraordinary courage and conviction in defending each other and using all their smarts and training to keep the situation as calm as possible. Lauren, with her unfaltering dedication to keeping the most vulnerable protected, and Emma, intrepid and strategic as always, managed to start recording on a small dictaphone, with the audio later played on news channels and documentaries. The Sunday Times photographer's film was ripped from his camera and he was dragged up the highway and terrified. And the only record of what had happened was that shocking audio recording in everyone's memories. Angel, emotionally present and focused, had helped the photographer as the mob was arriving, explaining the non-violent approach that they would take, and also had her camera taken and the film ripped out. She remembers an older man who had come with the group, supporting her to get a young family in a car and safely away, and that he had come to try and stop them from hurting anybody. The following day, the media came to see the caravan upturned and the water tank smashed in, and Louise Morris, competent and calm as ever in a crisis, joined Lauren and Emma in telling the story of the attack that they'd all endured. I was away from the camp at the time, and I was alerted to what was happening after a couple of people made the late night drive from Manjimup with a warning of what was going to happen in the morning and even what time to expect them. I made multiple calls to the police, begging them to attend, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. They refused to drive out to camp to stop the violence and keep people safe. Eventually, the case made it to court, and the little Manjimup courtroom was full with blockaders and timber workers, and the walls were lined with police officers. Only 11 of the men had been charged, and the timber lobby group joked that they would fundraise for the fines. None of the assaults or threats of violence were dealt with meaningfully, and we were threatened with contempt as we tried to have our stories heard. It wasn't the only time the groups of usually intoxicated timber workers and their supporters came to camp to terrify us. We experienced this multiple times, with that day in August being the most violent and well reported. And blockaders on the East Coast went through nights of assaults that caused major and lasting trauma. I raise this because I want this House to know, and for it to be on our state record, that dedicated, non-violent, mostly young volunteers lived in the forests across this continent to defend them not for their own sake, but for the sake of the forests and the wildlife who inhabit them, and for future generations to know the wonder of ancient forests and the incredible diversity and richness of life that rely on them. And there were times that they endured violence, and they were systematically and routinely let down by the police and by the state. Now we celebrate the end of logging in WA and Victoria, and people look back on these times as if they were of another era. But of course, active defence of nature and justice goes on. Activism and protests have been central to delivering many of our social and environmental protections, and the people who make this possible are some of society's bravest and most forward-looking and determined, and I've been lucky to spend most of my adult life in these communities. As governments become more beholden to industry and democracy is weakened around the world, we must uphold and defend the right to protest. To WA's activists, organisers and protesters, thank you for your work. I will always stand with you. Talking about society's most determined, I want to particularly acknowledge the matriarch of the WA Forest Movement, Dr. Beth Schultz AO. Beth introduced me to the Forest Campaign in 1997, walking along the Donnelly River near Pemberton and blowing my young mind with her stories of struggle, strategy, enormous losses and fierce commitment. Beth is often asked how she keeps going after all these years. It was her 89th birthday a few weeks ago, and she's still as fierce as ever. And she says, "It's not love of the forests or whatever, it's rage. I just can't stand the lies." And with that rage and clarity, Beth has stood at the front of the ship, guiding the campaign and setting the standard, including for accuracy, grammar and good referencing for longer than I've been alive, and she is deeply loved and admired. My story started in South Africa, where I was born the third child, with one more to come, in 1978. I come from a long line of nature lovers, and this gift was passed on to me. On my mum's side, there are botanists, paleontologists, writers, entomologists and zoologists, and a smattering of advocates for progressive politics and social justice. Whenever we were out in the bush, we were under instructions from my grandpa, Peter Brain, to collect leaves and post them to him through the mail for identification, remembering to remove any leaf-eating bugs first so that he didn't just receive an envelope with one fat caterpillar in it, which we got better at with time. My dad's maternal line arrived in South Africa from France in the 1700s and established wineries and farms in the astonishingly beautiful Cape region. His paternal line came later, just before the First World War, from Germany, and narrowly escaped the internment camps with support from my opa's father's employer. My ancestors have given me a deep love of nature, a capacity for hard work, a preference for living in the bush, a drive for social justice and emotional authenticity, and a taste for a good glass of red wine after a long day. We arrived in Australia when I was 10 years old, and I was placed in a Year 6 classroom where I felt like an alien. Some kids were kind, and I still have friendships built there, especially with Jen Lowe and Ben Coyne, but I mostly remember being relentlessly teased about my accent and my culture and finding those early years very challenging. I went on to Hollywood High School, where the humanities program was excellent, and teachers Gwen Brockman and Jim Head opened my mind to Australia's history and encouraged me to go deeper and articulate the strong feelings I was having in their classrooms. I had wonderful friends, especially Jessie and Gav, Nat and Sally. Thanks to my oldest sibling, Anda, and my boyfriend Gav, who played in well-loved Perth bands Effigy and the Rosemary Beads, I had a solid upbringing in the Perth music scene, and through Anda in the Perth queer scene, without doubt the best of the city in the 1990s and today. I'm close to my siblings. Anda is the oldest. They run a bakery in Melbourne's West, where, as they say, you cannot be motivated by money or prestige, but the food is actually quite good and the vibe is tip-top. Anda is fiercely intelligent and hilarious and has done more to turn struggle into kindness, wisdom and compassion than anyone else I know. During the marriage equality referendum, Anda's lovely kids were in primary school, and they had to shield them from the nastiness of the country debating the validity and morality of their family. It was a shameful time in our history, but at least we won. Anda chose a wise, kind, excellent father for their kids. Thanks for coming into our family, Rob McDonald, and a profoundly grounded, calm, compassionate and intelligent partner, Rivka. And kids, I'm enormously proud of you, and you always have an auntie championing you on in the West. Max is my quick-witted and big-hearted older brother. Max answered the instability in our childhoods with dedication, hard work and commitment to his family, and he has built a life full of success and love on this foundation. He and his wife, Gabby Quinlan, and their kids have generously housed me in the city during my outrageous double-life stints between my own family on the South Coast and work demanding I be in Perth over the years. You've been such a solid foundation for me to launch from and come back to when things have been exciting, daunting, successful and challenging, and the bonus is I've been able to spend all this time with you. And Tom is my quiet, thoughtful and determined younger brother. I'm enormously proud of you, Tom, and the life you're building with the extraordinarily focused, energetic and loving Prue, and only hope that you tire of Queensland soon so we can get back to building cubby houses and playing with Skondo, but this time with your delightful kids. My parents have always driven us to keep learning, to work hard and to pursue our dreams. I want to acknowledge my dad, who's come from Melbourne to be here. Thanks, Dad, for your commitment to us kids and the grit and passion you pass down to us. And my mum, who's also here today. My mum is my gardening, walking and red wine on the veranda companion. She has a never say die attitude, and I believe by the force of her own will she will never even grow old. She loves the cockatoos in the same way that I do, and she has that same deep reverence for the natural world. She's shown us kids that change for the better is always possible and taught us how to get on with it. Thanks, Mum. I've also been lucky to end up with two wonderful parents-in-law. While my birth family doesn't know how to sit still, Ian and Barbara are the embodiment of patience and stillness. Thank you for generously welcoming me into your family and for all the help and encouragement you've given me over the years and for the wonderful son you've raised. I graduated from high school in 1995, spent a year in Melbourne, and then came home and enrolled in politics and economics at UWA. Economics enraged me, not least where my tutor instructed me to wait until third year for arguments about nature being an externality. But I found a sense of purpose in student politics and especially the environment department, which led me to the old growth forest blockades. I came back to university after the blockades ended and the old-growth forests were officially protected, albeit with some key disappointments that nagged at me to study politics and international relations. I was deeply inspired by Professor Samina Yasmin. I was tired after the blockades and enjoying my comfortable bed and easy bike ride through Kings Park to uni. But when my boyfriend at the time was diagnosed with cancer that had spread aggressively through his body, I withdrew to take care of him. This was a tumultuous and challenging time, especially as he became violent and controlling. And once he was in remission, I left to spend time with my parents in Hong Kong and recuperate. Gender-based violence is extremely common. An estimated 30% of women in WA have experienced some form of abuse by a partner, and multiple Australian women are killed in gender-based violence every month. It's a national crisis and warrants an urgent and major response, but services are still crying out for critical resources, and women and children are still living with fear and violence without the support they need to ensure their safety, and we have to do better. The next chapter of my life began gaffer taping carpet and extension cords onto a concrete floor in preparation for a warehouse party in the CBD, where I met my partner, Craig. Our discussion turned to kindness and how the world could be so different if there was more of it. And for the past 22 years, our relationship has been based on this solid rock of kindness, getting on with things together and trying to make the world a better place. Craig has been my strongest and most enthusiastic supporter. He's always believed in me, even when my dreams have seemed impossible, and he's kept me steady on the many occasions that I've exhausted and overwhelmed myself fighting against the tide. I'm the adventurer in our family, pushing for new projects and journeys, and Craig is the safe harbour, keeping the ship steady and making the repairs. He's also a wonderful parent. He adores our kids and calmly creates an environment for them to thrive in. I got extremely lucky there. We've lived in the Southwest together for just over 20 years now. Living in small communities asks us to find common ground, be a good neighbour, community member and volunteer and rise to challenges. While the Walpole community in our years there was sometimes divided along political lines, it was more often united by people from all persuasions working constructively together to keep systems functioning, because we rely on each other in ways that people in the city often don't. I will have my electorate office in the Southwest so that I can offer a meaningful service to this community, whoever they vote for. Skilled and caring people and high-quality, readily accessible community services in the bush are life-saving, and I've learned this from personal experience. When my son Finn was born in 2009, he arrived very dramatically into the world. I'd been in labour with my daughter Luca for 36 hours, so I'd wrongly assumed that I would have time to get to the Albany Hospital for Finn's delivery, but it wasn't to be. On our way into town just after midnight, I was struggling not to push. Craig phoned our friend Laura, one of the nodes in town who knew everyone and their phone numbers, and she gave us Penny Murphy's number. Penny has since passed away, and may she rest in peace. Penny was the child health nurse in town. She'd cared for all of our babies over many years, and before moving to the Southwest, she'd been a midwife at King Edward Hospital. Penny raced into town to meet us at the Silver Chain, where she relieved the nurse Bob. Bob was a lovely man, but having only attended 2 births in his life, both of which were his sons and both by caesarean section, he wasn't feeling particularly prepared for the situation he found himself in. Penny arrived just in time to find me ready to deliver, but with Finn's cord tightly wrapped around his neck and too short to manoeuvre him through. She skillfully kept me calm and carefully clamped and cut the cord before helping him out into the world. When she passed him to me, he was blue and still, and it was as if the world stopped turning. It didn't take long for Finn to start breathing again, and we are now blessed with this beautiful, delightful, funny, intelligent, compassionate, ethical and deeply kind kid. And although Penny shrugged it off and said we all would have been fine without her, I believe she saved Finn's life that night, and she'll always have a special place in our family. I've been an activist since long before my kids were born, and they've been raised in an activist family. All 3 of them believe in the power of people to make a difference. They're practical and do what they can with what they've got. And they're reflexively thoughtful about what the kind response is to any issue. I'm enormously proud of them. Luca marked her time at high school defending kids on the bus when sexual harassment was taking hold, standing up for the transgender and queer kids, and pushing back on sexist and racist language in the classrooms, all while getting extraordinary grades and playing leading roles in school theatre productions. She's now in that fabulous time in her life where she's choosing where to put all this fierce love, courage and intelligence, and we're excited to see what she finds that makes her the happiest and what further contributions she will make in this world. And Finn has grown into an extremely competent kid who can reverse a trailer far better than I ever will. Instinctively knows how to fix everything, aces his science and maths tests seemingly without having studied, and carries himself with ease and humility. Charlie came along 6 years after Finn, 9 after Luca. We were ready for a speedy delivery this time and spent the last week in a borrowed apartment 30 seconds from the hospital. As a baby and toddler, Charlie loved a laugh like no one else I'd ever met, and he has brought a whole new chapter of playfulness and delight to us, and a huge awareness that sometimes seems too big to fit in such a small person, and he has perfectly completed our family. It hasn't always been easy for my kids or for Craig having me on the road so much, but they've always cheered me on and thrown their arms around me when I've gotten home, and I honour and treasure our love and connection above all else. As I said earlier, I was left with nagging disappointments after the end to old-growth logging in 2001. The unscientifically narrow definition of old growth excluded vast areas of forest that should have been protected, and the promise to also protect other high conservation value areas came to almost nothing. In 2010, after a few years working on local environment issues, establishing ourselves, building our family, I returned to dedicated forest conservation, this time with the WA Forest Alliance. WAFA is a fabulous organisation, full of powerful women leaders and a commitment to strategic grassroots organising. After 11 years of relentless campaigning, we finally achieved the official end to native forest logging. And while much remains to be done for the forests, this was a huge achievement that was only made possible thanks to the tireless efforts of so many people whose love for the forests and their wildlife and an ability to keep fighting against the odds finally translated into the end of clear felling of Karri forests and industrial logging of ancient Jarrah 46 years after the campaign began in earnest. WAFA continues to lead the charge for the formal secure protection of the additional 400,000 hectares of forest promised as part of this policy change, and overhaul the prescribed burning and an end to forest mining under the dedicated and strategic leadership of Jess Boyce and a wonderful board. During this time, I also went back to university, this time to study science, and third time lucky, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Management. I've learned more out in the world than I did at university, but it equipped me with scientific literacy, research and writing capabilities that have certainly been beneficial. The two profoundly valuable leadership programs that I've been a part of, Women's Environmental Leadership Australia and Social Impact Leadership Australia, have also equipped me with valuable lessons and insights. Both programs ask participants to consider what kind of leadership they want to bring to the world, and then they give us the skills and lines of inquiry that we need to step into that. I took this with me when I was asked to take on the role of Executive Director at Conservation Council of WA. CCWA is a vital organisation made up of some of the most committed, wholehearted and intelligent campaigners in the country. It was an honour to work with them all and difficult to leave, but I know the organisation will continue to thrive under Matt Roberts and Mia Pepper's connected, collaborative and deeply ethical leadership. Throughout all of these experiences and more, since I was 19 years old, there's been one person other than my immediate family who has stood alongside me, and that's my dear friend Lauren Loz Caulfield. Lauren's extraordinary intelligence, wisdom, compassion, courage, and the active love she shows her communities make her an exceptional person who I am most grateful for. I also want to thank my new and incoming staff, Georgia, Nelson and Gabby, for joining me in this work. I'm excited to work with you. As I deliver this speech, there is even more than climate change, biodiversity loss and social inequality that we're contending with. There is a genocide underway in Gaza and escalating tensions across the region. Nothing can ever justify efforts to eradicate a whole population, to deliberately starve children, kill aid workers, destroy hospitals, block aid, and brazenly admit your intent to wipe out a people. It has been distressing to watch these atrocities and see our governments prevaricate. It has also been extraordinary to see the courage of people setting sail and forming convoys to reach Gaza to break the siege, and that bring what aid they can and show the people of Gaza that they're not alone, and that when governments fail, ordinary people will not allow a genocide to continue without every possible intervention. Joanna Macy talks about the great unravelling, and that while it brings chaos and despair, it also brings opportunity. And she encourages us not to look away, but to bring our best selves to the moment. We should not passively watch the demise of nature, the march of climate change, the rise of authoritarianism or atrocities of war. We should step in with courage and work for a better future. The approach that I will bring to this term of Parliament will be one based in kindness, conviction, deep listening and courage, as well as an unwavering dedication to real action for social justice and the protection of nature and wildlife. I welcome this opportunity and I look forward to working with everyone in this chamber as we deliver the best we can, individually and collectively, for the people and countries across this state. Thank you.
The message. The message.
After messages, and then we'll do the first and second reading.
Yeah. Okay. What am I doing? I'm looking for that. Nope. Deputy chairs. Steve is meant to be. Steve can do the message. Steve. Steve. Deputy President. Huh? No, we've got a message.